Minister Maigad a Chairla agus a Chanise tan na Scalta Dritin a Siobhín Tríhulaigh da bhí Warta agus tuismarí, poistí agus múntarí foicha sa darahatas ó hiú cedé na planile sa tauchaí agus fáin bhí van fóver. Tesa gon ghfuil moll agus ar na planine seo a alsiú runniu pracastá leis an year rialtas agus an year ara agus inis níimiid feiceáil aon rud na cloinsin aon rud ón ara uair seo. So schools Taoiseach have been closed now since the 13th of March. Parents, teachers and students have been left in the dark ever since. We've had delay after delay. The previous government made a mess of things. We had promises and commitments from the previous minister that a comprehensive roadmap for the reopening of schools would be published. He changed his mind on numerous occasions, and a plan never emerged. Under the new minister, it's more of the same. No plan has materialised. But now we're just over 4 weeks from the traditional date of reopening schools. And as it stands, Taoiseach, schools don't know what's happening. Parents don't know what's happening. Students don't know what's happening. School transport operators don't know what's happening. Here in the Dáil, we don't know what's happening. And I would suspect that on your side of the House, you don't know what's happening either, based on the silence from the Minister for Education thus far. Tens of thousands of parents have no idea how their children are going back to school in September. I've no idea how my 4 kids are going back to school in September. My wife's a teacher. My 3 sisters are teachers. Like tens of thousands of other teachers, they don't know how they're going back to school in September. And they deserve clarity. They deserve, along with the thousands of other ancillary support staff across the state in our education system, they deserve clarity from the state. By the time you're talking about publishing your plan, we may be just 3 weeks out from reopening schools. And I get that some of this is complex. I understand all that and I appreciate that, but some of it isn't. We know that some of it's quite straightforward. We know that we will need additional teachers. We know that more money will be needed. We know that we need more space. We know that we'll need increased investment in cleaning and hygiene and other measures. We know that children will need buses to get to and from school, and we know that other children with additional needs will need to be catered for in this environment. The reality is, Taoiseach, that parents are really worried, they're stressed out, they're anxious in relation to this. And at this time, as is the norm, they're currently getting things together. School uniforms, mixed signals, will we need school uniforms or not, school bags, all of the rest. They're being contacted by Bus Éireann to say you now need to start paying your fees for school transport, not knowing how school transport will operate. They're being asked to pay for school books in the school. Many parents I'm speaking to simply don't have confidence that this government has the ability to get their kids back to school in September in a safe way. Okay, so I'm asking you to reassure them. I'm asking you, will you tell us and give us a commitment that all children will return to school on a 5-day-a-week basis from September? Can you tell us how many extra teachers are to be hired and when this recruitment will start? And can you give us some indication what is happening? Because parents need answers, students need answers, and teachers and school management need answers as well.
Taoiseach to respond.
I want to thank Deputy Doherty for raising this really important issue, and I know members from all parties in this House have taken a real interest in this very important matter. There are hundreds of thousands of parents across the country who are very concerned about this and want to know the details and want to know how their children will be able to go back to school at the end of the year. And of course there are over 1 million children and young people who need to get back to school at the end of August because they've lost 3 and 4 months of schooling, and that's not good for their education, not good for their development, not good for their socialisation. And while you might be able to make up for your 4 lost months, it'd be very hard to make up for losing more months beyond that, and that's why it's crucial and essential that we get the schools open at the beginning of the academic year at the end of August as planned. And that is the plan. Provided that the virus continues to be suppressed as it is now, that will happen. And a lot of work is being done by the Minister of Education, by the Department, by the teachers' unions, by principals and school partners to get everything in place that we need in place for the schools to open at the end of August. But we want to get all the details right before we share them widely, because what would undermine confidence is to come out with a set of details and plans today and then change them in a week's time or 10 days' time. So, you know, we need a little bit of people bearing with us, at least for the next couple of days or couple of weeks while those plans are put in place. What I will say, though, is this. There are many other countries across Europe that have a higher incidence of the virus than us. Countries like Germany, for example, that have dealt with the pandemic very well, but as of today, and indeed for the last few months, have had a higher incidence of the virus than us. And they've been able to reopen their schools. There are other countries that have suffered much worse than us in this pandemic and never closed their schools fully. So I do think it would reflect very badly on us as politicians, on the government and on the education partners if we were unable to open our schools in August, when other countries that have suffered much worse than us didn't close them fully at all, or were able to reopen them back in June.
Doherty.
Taoiseach, you talked about that is the plan, but none of us have seen the plan. You've asked the people to bear with us for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. The reality is, Taoiseach, the public, the people have bared with you for the last 4 months since the schools have been closed. It is now just over 4 weeks until they are to open. So we need a bit of certainty. We appreciate that some of this might take a bit longer, but we need to know, for example, is the plan that all children, as you mentioned, nearly 1 million children, will return to education on a 5-day-a-week basis from the end of August, start of September? Is that the plan? Can you give that type of outline? Can you tell us how many teachers, a rough estimate, additional will need to be hired? And when is that process going to take? Because that isn't something that happens automatically. What is happening with school transport? Because bus operators don't know yet, the bills are coming in to parents and households. Can you give any indication that there will be no ban on school uniforms, for example, which are causing anxiety in relation to parents? Parents need these answers. They have waited for 4 months. They have heard your previous minister, Joe McHugh, stand with you at a podium saying that there would be a comprehensive plan by the end of June. It didn't materialise. They have listened to complete deafness from the Minister for Education, who has said nothing for the last number of weeks in relation to what is envisaged. So can you answer some very simple questions as to what is the principles of this plan, and particularly can you give certainty, if things remain the same in relation to the virus, that all children will return to school on a 5-day basis at the end of August?
Thanks very much, Deputy. We've learned a lot about this virus over the past few months, things that we didn't know back in March when the schools were closed. And one thing that we have seen from other parts of Europe and across the world is that while nothing is no risk, the risks that arise from opening schools are low. And that's why it should be done. And countries, as I mentioned, that have a higher instance of the virus than us, that have suffered worse than us in this pandemic, didn't close their schools fully. The schools were never fully closed north of the border, for example, and in other places like Germany, for example, which is a higher incidence of the virus than us, the schools opened in June. So, this is something that we have to do as a country and a society, and would reflect very badly on us if our schools were the only schools in Europe not to be open in September. So a lot of work is being done on this by the Minister of Education, by the Department, and with the education partners. What I don't want to do is to give detailed answers to questions only for those answers to change in a few days' time or a few weeks' time, because this is still evolving. But it's not true to say that there's no information out there. The interim public health advice from the HPSC has already been published, and that is the public health advice on what needs to be done in schools to make sure that they can open in a safe way. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement happening at the moment, which is crucial too. In relation to uniforms, the Department has received interim public health advice for educational settings provided by the HSPC, as I mentioned, and the advice focuses on keeping COVID-19 out of the schools and control measures to minimise the spread if introduced into schools. There's a particular emphasis on hand and respiratory hygiene and physical distancing measures. No issues from a public health perspective have been raised regarding children wearing school uniforms. So the normal policy for each school in respect of wearing uniforms will remain a matter for each school and each board of management. So there's no public health reason for any change of policy on uniforms. But as is always the case and was the case before COVID, that is a decision for boards of management.
Thanks, Taoiseach. Deputy